Okay, welcome, Megan. Thank you for taking part in this interview. I'm excited that I am taking a virtual tour back to Saba, and today we're going to be discovering what more Saba has to offer. So, welcome.
Hi, Simpra. Thank you so much for having me.
Tell us a little bit about who is Megan and what is it that you do on the beautiful island of Saba?
Well, I'm originally American. I grew up in the United States, but I'm now Dutch as well. Have been since 2009. I'm 41. I'm a mother of two, a wife to one.
Mhm.
um, and I am a maker. My main business is designing sewing patterns.
Mhm.
I design them and I sell them in PDF format only at this point through my website, which is halfmoonatelier.com.
Mhm.
I also teach sewing. So I teach sewing, well, essentially just in my garage. Um, I teach sewing sometimes internationally. I guess that's one thing that's this new normal is that I
Online.
don't
Yeah.
travel right
Uh-huh.
now. I've done a couple online courses, but mainly because we do get to live a relatively normal life day to day here. I teach it just in my garage.
Yeah. Well, you sell clothing. Do you just give is it sewing classes or you also have a fashion line where people can buy clothes?
So it's not. I don't sell the finished clothing. I just sell the patterns so that
Okay.
people make their own clothing.
Okay.
When I started my business back in 2013, it started with leather bags, but that was when we were living in Amsterdam still.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a bit easier access to, Italy, so
Mm-hmm.
the leather
Mm-hmm.
and the tanneries there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I did introduce clothing. So this was all finished goods then.
Mm-hmm.
I introduced that actually right as we were moving to Saba, and I started a shop here. And then realizing that it was just very expensive and kind of difficult and a little bit unreliable to get the supplies and also to then ship them out,
Okay.
I decided to shut down the finished goods, so the selling of actual product,
Mm-hmm.
tangible products, and to focus just on the design. So I do still kind of design the clothing.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that you have to make it yourself.
What is your background? Do you have a fashion background?
I don't. I'm self-taught.
Oh, nice.
My background, so my education is originally in business,
Mm-hmm.
as well as European public affairs.
Mm-hmm.
So I came from a very different world, and it was just a major career shift
Mm-hmm.
back in 2013. Um,
What
as a
happened then?
child,
What
pardon?
happened? What happened that made you do the shift? You were in business field
Yeah,
and now you're more creative with your creative talents. What happened at
yeah.
that moment?
So I actually, even though my degree is in business, I was working in the field of international development as like a grant writer, essentially. Yeah, what happened? I suppose what happened is that um, a bit of a breakdown, I suppose. um, yeah, I kind of burnout.
Yeah.
A lot of things were changing. I was a new mom. I had two very small children.
Hmm.
I was traveling, and that was not necessarily a problem, but I also started to um, kind of wonder how much, if international development was having more positive impact than negative.
Hmm.
And that really started, yeah, that just became too big of a question for me. And I thought, I can't answer this yet. And in fact, to be honest, I've still not decided for myself. I think it depends on the country and the situation if international development has more positive or negative impact. Anyway, that just, yeah, caused me to have a bit of a breakdown.
Yeah.
And also with all of that, I wasn't making anymore. As a child, in my high school, I took tons of art classes, photography, pottery, painting, and I just didn't have the time to do that anymore. And that all kind of exploded, I guess, at once.
Mm-hmm.
And what helped me to get out of that deep depression was, well, one of the things was to start making again.
Nice.
Yeah.
So what I think is so interesting is that when you begin as an entrepreneur, you have an idea and then you make it into a business. So I'm always curious to know, when did you have the confidence to say, okay? And before I say that, everyone that I've interviewed so far, except for one, they all came out of a whole different industry. So it's kind of the lesson of, we're taught you have to go to school, do a study, and this is what you're going to do for the rest of your life. And then something happens. There's a transition. It can come with depression. It can become just with a failure of something. And then you go into a whole different part of doing things. And it's so, I think it's so inspiring to hear that creativity is what then becomes your passion, and then you do something with it. So that's exactly what you explained.
Yeah.
I was curious to know, because you can definitely motivate someone with your story that I might start here, but I can end up here and I can make a business out of it. And what I was telling you is,
Yeah.
what I think is unique about your story is that you didn't decide to make the clothing, but you decided to make the pattern so that you can help others with it. So very inspiring.
Yeah. And it is interesting. Yeah, I didn't even realize. I always sewed, as like, I learned to sew as a child from my mother, and that's something that I just often came back to. But it wasn't until I was selling the clothing that I found that there are people who, that you don't have to be part of this really big company to sell your own patterns.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I didn't realize how massive the home sewing community was online.
Okay.
And it's funny, if you're not a part of it, it just seems like, people go, is there a market for that? Like, do people do that anymore?
Yeah.
But yeah, if you're not a part of it, like if you don't do that yourself, you just don't realize it's there or that anybody really cares.
Mm-hmm.
And the funny thing is once you get into it, you're like, gosh, everybody's a pattern designer. Like in my world, it feels like everybody designs patterns.
What do you mean with sustainable sewing? Do you explain? What do you mean with sustainable sewing?
Yeah, so there's a lot rolled up into that word, and I know there's also a lot of kind of greenwashing out there. So I don't. How to say that? I try to promote the idea of just, being very cognizant of just the types of fabrics you're using, and also like what you're making. And it's not to say you should never make something just to make it, because there's also a lot of, just for your own mental health, that can be a really wonderful and important thing to do. But when it comes to like clothing, that's also, if you're purchasing something, just to think about where it came from. Think about if it's, what it's doing to the earth, and
the fabric, the materials you're talking about, right? The materials.
Right. Right. So like the cotton, how was it made? Or is this synthetic material? Is that leaking more plastics and microfibers into the ecosystem? And the people who then created it, took whatever that is, if it's synthetic or cotton or linen, whatever, who made it into fabric, how were they treated?
Garment sewing retreats, which I think is, so you've been able to add a tourism product to your business. Tell me about it.
Yeah. So this is something that I definitely conflicts with the sustainability, because I know that air travel, of course, is not sustainable. Okay. This is something I personally find quite difficult, because I do find it really important. Tourism is an important business in a lot of countries, especially the Caribbean. And there are ways you can do it in a more sustainable manner for maybe, yeah, I guess not so much for the air because of airplanes, but that does help to create more opportunities for local businesses. So yeah, and I love to travel, and what I love most when I travel is not to go to large hotel chains, but to connect a bit more. I don't believe that you can really fully you cannot ever fully integrate into a local culture within a few days, of course.
Yeah.
But you can ensure that what you're doing is supporting local businesses. You can eat at local restaurants, you can stay in locally owned hotels.
Yes.
You can purchase, if you purchase any sort of clothing or any goods, you can try, do your best to purchase from locally produced or local artisans. Yeah, so what I did in 2019 is I had my first retreat here on Saba, and I also hosted one in Lisbon in Portugal. But yeah, of course, it's very special to bring people here to Saba.
Yeah.
Because Saba is quite unknown.
What is the experience for the client?
Yeah, so that's a really special experience. I like to keep groups small and intimate. So I have a maximum of 8 people who come to the island for the retreat, and I go to pick them up from the airport. And of course, landing on Saba already is a very special experience.
Yes, it is.
It's the shortest commercial landing strip, I believe, in the world.
Yes.
And it's just a very interesting experience, and a little stripe at the end of a rock.
It's 400 meters long.
Yeah. And so I pick people up, and then, I just love watching the eyes of people arrive to Saba. It just reminds me of the first time that we arrived here, and you just see their eyes go, wow, because it's a very picturesque place, very, bituminous, like the Dutch word, a little cozy. So yeah, we pick them up and we drive up the windy road up to Windward Side, and then the experience is that it's relaxing and kind of rejuvenating, but it's also there's freedom to be active and hike if you'd like a bit, but it's also about connecting with each other through our love of making, and then also experiencing the restaurants. We happen to have some pretty good restaurants here on the island. We have a few, but they're good, and so we have like the tasty flavors as well as the local crafts. So I make sure to pepper in kind of more culturally relevant crafts, such as lace making.
Yeah.
So I hire one of the lace makers to teach a workshop on making Saba lace.
Okay, nice.
Saba lace was like the original, kind of women's empowerment. And women on Saba used to bring in a lot of money through their lace work, which they sold all over the world.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay. Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So it was the island of women, because the men were off working on the boats and fisheries and different places. And the women were here keeping things going and selling their lace through mail order, of all things. And
That is an amazing story because I didn't see another unique thing about Saba. I'm finding out today.
Yeah,
Thank you for that.
yeah. And lace is kind of a dying art because so many people see it as this kind of, grandma's work and kind of doilies. But you think, well, there are lots of wonderful, amazing things that you can still do with that.
Yeah.
And so anyway, so we do that, and we also do some indigo dyeing. Indigo was never like a major industry on the island the way lace was,
Hmm.
but indigo does grow just natural on the island. And
Okay.
we have an artist here, Anna, who uh, forages and picks the indigo, and she goes through the whole process to bring it into an indigo dye bath.
Hmm.
And yeah, so we dye some fabrics,
Okay.
and then we can use that in our. People are free to use that, of course, in their sewing here if they'd like, or if they want to, if they're working on a different project, that's fine. So the sewing we do then is, it's quite free. So I, of course, am there to support and instruct on anything for any of my patterns,
Hmm. Hmm.
but I don't set like a specific project that we work on.
Hmm.
Um,
So it's
that's
pretty much
because,
free. You get to do your own thing.
right,
Yeah. Okay.
right, because it's possible that, well, I think we all have our own different tastes and styles,
Hmm.
and I don't want people to think, to feel like they can't come and enjoy the island
Yeah.
and all it has to offer if they don't feel like sewing a shirt, for example, or a dress.
Okay.
And
Is it a weekend? How many days is the retreat?
it's 5 nights, so it's almost a week.
Almost a week. Like you said, you have to be in the world, in that world of sewing to know that these things are possible. I didn't know, so I learned a lot today. And I'm sure
Yeah.
people listening that are on the islands who are thinking I want to get into more sewing, I hope they can definitely should go ahead and book your retreat, visit your website. So very interesting.
Yeah, I love food. And for me, the way you experience a culture
Mhm.
is through flavors.
Definitely. I
Um,
fully agree.
yeah, yes. And so we have, well, we've got some wonderful restaurants.
Mhm.
So you can experience those at the end of your day or partway through the day after a hike and before a dive, or the other way around.
What type of cuisine?
Yeah.
What type of cuisine do you have in your restaurants?
Fish. There's definitely a lot of fish, which I think is fabulous. We've got some fabulous local fish from our local fishermen. Saba is definitely known for its lobster,
Mm.
and the fishermen have a very sustainable way of fishing. I don't know anything about fisheries, but I know that they have, they're very limited on the amount of people who are allowed to go fish in our waters to make sure that there's not a negative impact on the amount of fish we see here and our biodiversity. So that's great. Um, yeah, but we have different cuisines in some of our restaurants because of COVID. I would say that's, I know a lot of people have been so negatively affected, but one of the silver linings
Mhm.
has been that due to the lack of tourism, the restaurants have gotten more creative
Yes.
because you can't, so that they're not offering the same menu for an entire year for the same population.
Yeah.
So they're changing their menu much more often so that the local population is kind of like having a new restaurant every week or two.
Love that. I love that is a creative
It
solution
is
that I love hearing.
awesome,
Yeah.
which is why I can't really tell you exactly what kind of cuisine because it changes per week. I mean, sometimes we have, like, especially one of our restaurants, Shea Baba, you know, one weekend it's all vegan, and that might sound very like limited and, oh, what are you going to eat? But even meat lovers love it. And the next weekend it's Peruvian, and then it's Indonesian, and then it's, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
All different things. So that's why I can't really tell you what the cuisine is. It just depends on the week.
That's good, because that means that in Saba, you everyone, the business owners have endorsed, and you say they're more busy with the local tourists, and that's a great solution, a creative solution on how to keep your business going. Change it up, switch it up, keep it exciting. Nice, very much. Your story was very inspiring. I think I know for sure you've inspired people. You have told us something new, especially how to keep going. You've let us know that we have a sewing retreat we can book the next time, and definitely more what Saba has to offer. I loved also the part that you said about the restaurants, diversification, listening to your local tourists. So thank you very much. And like I said before, I will definitely visit Saba once we can do that again. And I invite you also to Suriname.
Thank you so much, Simpa, for having me and for taking the time to chat with me today. And indeed, I would also love to get to Suriname one of these days.
Thank you. Thank you.